Hey everybody, this week I am sat down with Anna Schlegel from Procore Technologies. We are excited to speak with you. I'm going to dive straight in so you can get the information from Anna, not from me. Anna, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm doing great, thank you.
Now you're out there on the West Coast. Tell us a little bit about how did you end up on the West Coast, the West Coast?
Yeah, West Coast. I moved to San Francisco when I was 23 from Catalonia. So I was a transplant from Barcelona and studying in Berlin. I moved to San Francisco for work. And I was 23 and I did not know I was in the Silicon Valley.
We share so much in common. I remember talking with you before about Barcelona's the city where I got engaged. We had that
That's right.
conversation. We
Yeah,
also had this, we're European imports into the United States. So I came
that's
from the
right.
UK. So that's fun. And then tell us, what was it like then? What was the cultural shift like for you moving from Europe into America? What was your experience of that?
I think when I was 23, it was so much fun, right? Because I landed in the middle of San Francisco. I'm like, this is not that different from a European city. You could walk places, restaurants, bars, lots of art galleries. There were newsstands, there were cinemas and theater and opera and the symphony. So it felt like it was not that difficult, right? And then little did I know that I had to buy a car right away, that I couldn't open a bank account because I had no credit. So it was it's been 30 years, right? But I remember starting to understand what it meant to live in the States, right? Like I remember coming and not knowing. I had studied philology and I had studied about the melting pot and diversity and stuff like that in the 80s, right? We call diversity was like the melting pot. And I remember arriving, I'm like, wow, there's so many cultures here. I was a little bit in shock coming from being Catalan in the 70s, growing up, like everybody looked like me. It was quite the cultural experience, but it was also to my advantage to be a European here because I also saw that a lot of companies didn't know much about Europe or had not done much work in Europe. It was really the cusp of companies want to go global. And so
Yeah.
I rode that wave really well, I think.
Well, why don't we share a little bit of that? Because, yeah, I know my experience of working in the UK versus the US are two extremes, very different environments. So perhaps tell us your experience. What do you think would be good, valuable information for somebody in the United States who may be thinking about going to Europe? What do you think are the things that you notice were the big differences between both territories?
My goodness. And people think that the Brits and the US, they all speak English and they're very similar. I'm like, no, not quite true. And then the further you get from the English speaking countries, the more culturally different we are, right? I think some of the first ahas was when an American would say, I'll call you. They didn't call, And when a Catalan tells you, I'll call you, you expect a phone call like the next day. And I don't know, these cultural differences was very interesting. And I think that's why to this day, 30 years later, my best friends are all from Europe or Brazil or Africa.
Oh,
We seem to share different values. We've been raised differently, right? I'm Mediterranean, where family is everything, where your word is everything. Words matter a lot. You may seem close at the beginning if you're European, but once you open a European and you're in, you're in
yeah.
versus what I saw here, and especially California. I love California. My kids are Californian, right? That they're super friendly and super open, but they're not as community oriented as, let's say,
That's right.
Italians or Spaniards or
Yeah.
Catalans. So that was a shock to me. I'm like, people spend Thanksgiving with their friends. I'm like, where are their families? Like, why are they not? I'm totally generalizing right now.
Yeah.
But these were, you're asking me what were the first ahas. I was like, okay, this is a different environment, and very practical environment, less bureaucracy. I was able to open my first business pretty fast and quickly. And people are very open to innovate together in the Silicon Valley. There's so many forums to change ideas and, invest in each other and help each other. So that part, I thought it was really cool. Yeah.
And I experienced very similar themes. Emotionally repressed Brits to completely emotionally available Americans, but that was enjoyable. So then tell us about, because there's another dynamic here I want to touch on, is that you're also a woman coming into Silicon Valley. So
Oh, yeah.
typically was back then, and maybe still now, it's kind of a man's world. Okay, I'd love to share for our viewers here, what were the kind of key things that you were coming up against as kind of resistant or difficult to deal with? And then how have you overcome that? Because I know, and I want to move on to this later in the conversation here, is you're doing an awful lot for women in businesses, particularly.
I am, yes, yes. I think I grew up with a father that made us run marathons and hike. And, I'm from the Pyrenees. We grew up very strong physically. I only have brothers. So I think that helped somehow because I was always like being roughed around and playing soccer and hiking. And we had a German Shepherd. And it was like a very masculine environment. And sometimes I reflect on this, that maybe that helped me prepare for what it is to be surrounded by male energy. The very first thing I did when I came to the States was open a company. And a lot of people, when I was starting doing business, they were like, who's your boss? Or who's your husband? Or what's your last name? Is that your husband's last name? Like people would try to figure out who I was.
Yeah.
And even throughout the last 3 decades that I've done major business in Japan, JVs in China, OEMs with Fujitsu, where I arrived and I was the vice president or the general manager of a company, and they would think I was the secretary. I've gone through everything. I've gone through like, why do you want to work? Why are you a mom and want to work? Who's your husband? Why are you? Who's your boss? Last name? Why do you have an accent? To worse things. I've gone through all of it, right? And I think this is why, to me, growing up in a place where my dad would say, like, let's all go to run. He wouldn't wait for me or wouldn't wait for any of my brothers. I didn't feel that I was less than. And so coming here, and then you get into business and working with so many cultures. And I've worked with thousands of people, literally, because I've led very large projects in Fortune 500 and sometimes Fortune 100 companies, where inside the company, there's thousands of people. You start to see all the cultural differences, right? Let's say that I have a team that's from Korea and from India, or that I report to somebody from India, or that I have people in my team that are from Argentina and Korea. So this is the melting pot that I learned in the 70s or the 80s going to college. We all come from how we were raised. We all come from these notions that my culture is the best, or how I act is okay, but it's not. You have to be really very careful and culturally sensitive, because we're all very different. And so one thing that I decided to do is put myself through gender and cultural studies for 5 years at Stanford. I took a lot of classes on listening. I took a lot of classes on how to manage virtually with India, or how to manage virtually with China, because for years I've been going to Japan, China, India, Japan, China, India, Japan, China, India, Japan, China, India. So getting to know, how do you work with all these folks to achieve the goals that you have, and making sure that they understand each other. Many times we've had to take classes of like, who are you? What motivates you? How do you work? Are you open to working with other cultures? And I think that, it's different and it takes different skills. A lot of people are like, oh, I've traveled, but it's very different to have worked in a different country, developing technology with people from different cultures. It's a skill. It's not everybody has that kind of stuff, right? So
I love that you're talking about leaning in on the good elements of your upbringing, because I'm sure you describe it like it's a little bit magical, and maybe it was, but there were probably times when it was difficult for you.
no, it's not magical when you're there. It's like 5 a.m. up, going to train for a marathon.
But that's it. But I think you've taken the best parts of that masculine environment and then used that to realize, well, there's a few other things going on for me. Is that I'm going to need some different skills, and you've talked through your education and how but you've done that from the perspective of service to others. And I think I'd like to kind of drill down on that, talk a little bit about your service to others as well. And this has got key lessons, if you like, for those people watching about how do you navigate a career through, I call it the jungle gym. It doesn't have to be a ladder. You don't have to just go straight up. You can go
It is,
places.
it is the jungle.
Yeah. Tell us about your service to others and then how you've built value doing that, because I think that's crucial for people to hear.
I think the service to others is, like there's all these love languages, mine is like serving other people. And I think it's the school I grew up and how my parents, the values that we got from my parents was always like others first. Like you would always serve food to the others first. You go last. That's the environment I grew up with. And the service to others came relatively quickly at a young age when my father had a nonprofit to clean up the mountains where we were surrounded. Or when I came to the States, I very quickly started a nonprofit with two friends of mine that's called Women in Localization, which is the largest organization of females in the world of globalization engineering, or folks that need to take any product or idea or solution globally.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it started with like 3 of us, and it blew up to like thousands. We're thousands. I think we're 30,000 people right now. And the service to others has come through all these years of getting phone calls around, can you mentor me? I am stuck. How would you do this? I spend hours and hours and hours on that. And people want to analyze me of like, why is it that you want to help so much? I don't know. I just like doing it. I wish many, many times when I came to the States, somebody would have helped me. I feel like I had to figure it out all on my own. So I always think if we can help another person, touch another person, say something, if everybody would be attached to one nonprofit or run a nonprofit or be on a board of a nonprofit, this would be such a different world, Yeah.
That's good. And it's, I want to get the name right. Is this Women in Localization? That's what
it is. Yeah.
And hopefully we can put a URL on the bottom here so people can come and check it out.
Yeah. And it's free. It's always been free. We offer tons of trainings for men and women. And on any topic around taking a company or a product or marketing solution, into the world. Yeah. We are about to open into 3 new countries. I think we're in 33. By the end of the year, we'll be in like 36, 37 countries.
You're like a modern day Mother Teresa. I always think of that quote when she says, a life not lived in the service of others is not a life. And now here you are giving this free service. It's just really powerful.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful.
I really want people to check this out. If you're watching this and you've got this far in the video, please go and check this out. It'll be in the show notes below. But also it's an opportunity for you to develop that value and that skills and serve others for yourselves too.
Yeah. And if I did it, other people can do it too, right? Like we started very small and it grew up very quickly. You can find whatever problem around the world. There's so many, right? And if you can apply a lot of the executive skills into real life problems, right? Because I was learning on how to go global and how to motivate people and how to form teams and how to replicate these ideas around the world, then that's how we became this powerful, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's led you to kind of this ideation innovation of years gone by. I mean, this is like 2 or 3 decades of ideation innovation has led you to where you are today.
Yeah.
So perhaps talk for a little moment about the value of innovation and the way you approach that now, because I think that's what connected us is that we're both product people. You know,
Yeah.
that's how we connected. But all around this innovation, and then how can people be thinking about how to innovate their own life, their own career, and get some results from working with
Well,
it?
it's a lot of interest. Like if it's your own life, I mean, something that I do every January that seems like very cheesy, but I do it every first week of January is like, okay, Anna, what's happening this year? You know, with the kids going to college, with my partner, what do we want to do? Like yesterday, we like, what do we want to achieve this year? It's like, oh, so many things, so expensive. Let's leave some for next year, you know? So you have to be very intentional with your own life. On the work side, at NetApp, I started something that was called the Globalization Innovation Lab, which
Huh?
we ended up with 70 trade secrets and patents. And so it's like obsessed with innovation in the field of globalization, content strategy, PLC, AI. I've been doing AI for decades. You know, people are like, AI, AI. I'm like, yeah, I've worked
Yeah,
with
yeah,
AI since I think
yeah, yeah. That thing that's been around since the 50s. Yeah,
94 when we were at Cisco and we were already trying to use machine translation, right? It's a constant. It's a constant. And you have to think of like a huge ladder or very high ladder. But how do you get up there with your goals and your vision? So we learned a lot of blue sky thinking methodologies. I've had incredible mentors. Dr. James Morgan showed me everything I ever wanted to know. I've done so many sessions with executives and gurus and went back to Kansas University to learn leadership and innovation on the concept of think really big, but start very small and iterate to scale fast. And you have to find the leaders that want to stick through that, you know, because a lot of people have brilliant ideas, but then they don't know how to operationalize these ideas. So that's why we created this innovation lab to say, we listen, we hear to a lot of ideas, and then we're like, that's a good idea. Would you like to lead that? Would you like to see that become a reality? What results do you envision? You know, what tasks would you take to get there? And so we ended up at NetApp, I believe that innovation lab that was attended with by more and more people hacking stuff and connecting dots with the notions already of content lakes and authoring lakes and things that are just other companies are starting to talk about right now was already back then. And so inside Procore, we started it again also. And I'm just fascinated by innovation, have patents and prior art, and have a small company in India that keeps popping up ideas, and it's just fun. I
awesome.
love it.
Well, maybe let me ask you a question about one final question about kind of career. I know we're short on time today, and maybe we can get you back for a second visit because we're already getting into some really cool stuff that I'd like to expand. But I want to ask you perhaps one more question about career and advisory to young men and women watching this who are kind of navigating their own journeys, and then I'll ask you a fun question maybe to wrap up. So what do you think? I'm thinking about this from the perspective of preferred interest. A lot of what you've talked about is things that you've been really passionate about, that you feel like there's a purpose to. What advisory do you have there that people follow their preferred interests?
That you have to be very brave and you have to be very well informed and then see if it's for you. And if that's the passion, if that's what you like, I mean, we're all inclined, or maybe sometimes we're predisposition like, oh, this girl is going to be in science and this girl is going to be in linguistics. I started in linguistics and then did a 360 study in telecommunications here in the States. So I think you need to do a lot of thinking of what really is it that you want and then just go for it like a nut. You know, study it. I recommend joining associations. So, for example, yesterday I ran content strategy for Procore, and we are part of a content strategy association. I always tell my teams, don't be an island, don't think that we know everything. I want you to bring ideas from other companies, like what's happening at PayPal, what's happening at Meta, what's happening at Google all the time. I think we belong to at least 3 or 4 of the largest forums on globalization, on content strategy. And I'm the president of Women in Localization, right? So we see so much innovation. And so I would say be knowledgeable, be the best, bring in intel. What are the competitors doing? You know, if you're working in high tech and you're in the space of globalization, you better know who are your competitors and how well globalized are they. That means you're studying, you know. To grow your career, you have to study, you have to be very knowledgeable. I remember one of the first things that somebody told me is like, Anna, start reading the newspaper every weekend. I was like, okay, you know, so you have to be knowledgeable, you have to be well-rounded, you have to change departments also. So throughout my career, I've been in product, I've been in engineering, I've been in digital marketing, I've been in field marketing, I've worked for a chief strategy officer, I've worked for a chief channel a VP of channel, you know, a chief product officers. Very lucky, you know, to be well-rounded and make those jumps and don't get stuck. Like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're calling it luck, but it sounds like it comes back to something you said earlier, which is you've actually done a lot of this intentionally.
It's been intentional, yes.
Yeah, it's like a career design, lifestyle design with intention. All right, let me sneak in one fun question. You talked about your kids there, and I'd love to know what if I was asking them what you do. Hey kids, what does mom do? What would they say?
She's some powerful woman. They I don't know. They see me like travel, and they'll say she's a woman in tech. That's what they would say.
Woman in tech.
A woman in tech.
They're right.
They are right. Yes.
But you've done a fantastic job, I'm sure. Okay, well, look, I know we're tight on time today, so I would love to invite you back, and perhaps we'll have a part 2 of this conversation. But thank you very much for your time. I know it's been hugely valuable for the people who've seen this today.
Thank you, James. Thank you.